I'm very comfortable with something being about 70%, 70 to 75%, because most of the time I only get a chance to come up with advice that's about 70 to 75% accurate, right?
Today, my guest is Ekumene Lysonge, the Chief Legal Officer and Corporate Secretary at NerdWallet, the publicly traded fintech that serves over 25 million users a month. He leads a combined trust and safety organization that spans legal, compliance, privacy, employment, information security, and he's been one of the clearest voices in the in-house world on what legal departments need to become right now. Ekumene's framework is built around decision discipline, and he has a different theory of the job than most CLOs you'll talk with. If you've ever watched a legal team get bypassed because it was too slow, or wondered whether the in-house model was built for the pace AI is setting, this is the episode for you. Also, fun fact, Ekumene has been in all kinds of tech companies and seen both the consumer side, the business side, and I am so excited to dive in. Ekumene, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, before we dive in, let's get in on this structure. So you lead a combined trust and safety org. A little bit ago, I had Danielle Shear, who created the title Chief Trust Officer at Commvault, and basically made the point that you have to move past legal to really have that influence. Now, I think this is a podcast about being great general counsel and being a great CLO, but in that structure that you created, was that part of it, this idea of being more than legal, and how has that shown up in practice?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to talk to my team in terms of analogy. So I equate the legal kind of security function to being like air traffic control, if you will, the command center of the company. And so we're responsible for making sure crashes, we're avoidant of crashes, making sure people are able to take off, and people I equate to ideas, right? Business strategies and initiatives are able to take off kind of undisrupted and ultimately land those ideas squarely where they need to be landed in order to deliver on whatever the value promise is to the customer. And so what I tried to do when kind of I wanted to reimagine, because I had two siloed teams, right? In most corporate environments, the security team resides kind of in its own silo and works primarily with engineering, and they're pretty unseen in most organizations. At least that's my experience. Whereas legal is similarly siloed, and then you have the compliance and privacy components thereof, and they also have their respective silos. And what I wanted to do is to make everyone feel as one team. And so I had to rebrand us under one umbrella to make everyone feel like, at least for our own operating system, we were a part of one combined unit, and therefore we removed those silos or swim lanes that people had kind of predefined, and we figured out how to way better ways to work kind of seamlessly amongst ourselves, and then present a united front to the company as we try to kind of push forward kind of this discipline that we wanted to push from a security, compliance, legal, privacy perspective to the rest of the company. And so I rebranded the team Trust and Safety, because on the legal side of the house, based upon how we go to market, I very much think that all the component parts of legal, and that's inclusive of compliance and privacy and legal operations, are really there to preserve or ensure that the trust that our customers have generated in NerdWallet, they're there to make sure that we continue to protect that trust and honor it with the integrity that the company was built on over all these years. And on the other side of the house, I saw the security team as the safety component. They're there to make sure that one, our infrastructure and our network and our customer-facing experiences and websites are secure and safe for our customers. As you alluded to, we serve 25 million plus customers a month, and therefore we take that very seriously and want to make sure that every time a customer engages with NerdWallet, they do that with a level of security and safety about their experiences and the products and all the ways in which they interact with our business. And so I brought the two together and coined the term trust and safety, and here we are. So
How's that worked out? So I guess curious around like, so a little bit about the NerdWallet. Tell us a little bit about the NerdWallet business. But as I
Yes.
see it, I'm on the website and it says 10 million financial decisions made, 15,000 financial resources, hundreds of experts, Chase,
Yes.
SoFi, American Express. So NerdWallet, I mean, I love great naming, but it's basically like someone at some point was like, I'm going to research the heck out of financial stuff. Let me put it on the internet and help others, right? So presumably that's
Yes.
how the company started. And then
Yes.
now, like you're in some pretty specific areas, right? I'm deciding what credit card or mortgage or huge decisions to make, and I'm coming to the site. So, with that background, and maybe any other background about the business, how has that trust and safety approach like affected both the business and, in this case, the end users?
Yeah, at the heart of it all, NerdWallet exists to help customers make decisions with confidence and clarity about all a host of different financial subjects that they are confronted with in their life, right? And you alluded to some of those. What credit card should I get? Who's the best lender for my particular mortgage situation? Where should I or how should I allocate my investment assets, and what's the best way to prepare for retirement? You name it, insurance products. And historically, NerdWallet was known as a place to go and learn about all different types of financial topics. We've evolved over the course of time to producing, market comparison tools, calculators, and other things to help people evaluate that, but still very much in their own their own personal ecosystems. And then we have evolved in more recent history even further in the sense that we are doing it for customers now through special concierge offerings where we can actually route a customer to a mortgage expert through a mortgage business that we acquired some time ago, or route a customer to an investment advisor to actually serve them and manage their assets for them, or route a customer to an insurance expert who can help them kind of tailor an insurance offering for their particular circumstance. So we have, the do it yourself option. We have the do it with you option with our comparison marketplaces. And then we have a do it for you option in a nutshell. And it spans everything from credit cards to insurance products and everything in between. As we want to get the customer more comfortable with turning to the nerds, if you will, for any and every decision that they have to make.
I love that, turning to the nerds. So, okay, so is there a situation where, I mean, I guess this type of thing, it kind of gets to, as a GC, you want to be that trusted advisor. And
Yes.
so here, your actual business, you're literally like, you want people to turn to you to decide what mortgage is best. So you can't really have security issues because then you're like, okay, I don't trust this person with their own website, let alone to tell me what to do. And so how, do you kind of staff accordingly in security? There's been a lot of, there's a lot of different paths you can take, but where do you turn that dial? And then obviously you're a public company as well. So tell us how you kind of set the risk priorities, I guess, at the company.
Yeah. So they're varying types of risk kind of paradigms or models that we have to consider. Obviously, we have general frameworks like NIST that we evaluate our security protocols and our privacy protocols against, and those are more for a board risk management, if you will, and risk observation or oversight. But then we obviously have all the nuanced kind of ways in which to present secure environments or enable AI kind of assisted kind of environments to meet the consumer in the way that our peers and competitors are meeting consumers, right? And so, there's the kind of board oversight lens that we have to operate in, the paradigm there that we have to operate within, but then we have to also operate within the confines of what is an ever evolving, a momentum filled kind of AI enabled world where customers are discovering products, engaging with products, and thinking about their financial circumstances in very dynamic ways, leveraging all the various LLM platforms out there. And so we have to still be able to meet them where they are and do that in a secure environment as well, which, as I'm sure we'll get into, has presented a host of different challenges, all, as I like to tell my team, all challenges that, have a certain level of job security involved with them, right? Because they're going to continue to evolve and they're going to continue to be present, and therefore you need professionals with experience and judgment to help lead the customer experience, and also to help lead the company into kind of that new territory. So different kind of risk vectors, different risk meters, if you will, are kind of ever present in everything we do. And I tend to be calibrated more from a risk tolerant, a higher risk tolerance level than most of the CLOs that I've interacted with. And I think because I come to most of conversations with a principled approach, or a perspective that is business centric first versus risk centric. And that's just based upon my experience of having been actually an operator in different parts of my career. So
any good examples of, you mentioned AI, but so you mentioned being a little bit more pragmatic about risk than maybe some of your peers. And in the fintech space, there was a tweet that, tweets sometimes, they're jokes or whatever, but they have some truth to them, that basically said something to the effect that like Robinhood, made a nicer UI on Fidelity and it's worth however many $1 billion. And it's like, it's not, and I want to say initially maybe Robinhood didn't even have like the banking charter or whatever it was. Like it literally was just a UI. And in Silicon Valley, people are like, wow, that's wonderful to have a UI, et cetera. But what the reason I bring up that example is that, just that slight frame, or you can imagine that early lawyers at Robinhood had to be like, okay, yeah, we're going to let people swipe left and right to make trades instead of, clicking 97 things. And, now you get into Robinhood, and I will say they do a pretty good job where they're doing crypto, they're doing unusual things, and the warnings kind of look gamified. They got little, gold pots of gold on them and things like that. And so I guess like, is that kind of the decision where your pragmatism shows up most? Or like is there something where you're sitting in a room and an idea is presented to you or your team, where most lawyers who did not have the frame you described would be like, yeah, no, like just literally just have a knee jerk, that's not a cool reaction. And so any good examples, any wins that you can share, and obviously there's privilege and whatever, but if there's anything that you can share where you're like, yeah, most people would not agree to whatever it is.
Well, I mean, you can look at our website and a host of different experiences. We're a very test heavy kind of culture. We like to try things. They're always consumer centric in terms of trying to advance the experience for the consumer and present the best product, the best possible experience, the best possible product to the consumer, no matter what the vertical, right? And so I sit in rooms all the time, and I've for whatever reason, when I entered kind of corporate America, I always entered it from the perspective of companies don't grow without taking risk. And if you want to be in that environment, you have to be someone that enables it. But I've always looked at it through the perspective of you need to be in a position to always say yes, but the yes has to be durable. It can't be something that's kind of a flash in the pan that doesn't stand up to scrutiny. And I think that comes with it, or what comes with that is making sure that every time a decision is made, there's a certain amount of rigor and discipline around it. And you're just not always making decisions on the fly without it being principled and based in kind of first principles, right? Or general decisioning kind of frameworks that the company has architected over time. And so, yes, I am more of a yes first, but let's make it durable kind of person versus a No. And I think that is, in many respects, kind of polarly opposite from peers of mine that I've.
Interesting. So, I mean, I think it's also like this, it's a little bit the one-way door thing with Jeff Bezos too, of like, okay, so if you're going to go through a two-way door and when you want to come back, that's fine. But if you go through that two-way door and you want the business to explode, what's it going to look like? Yeah, that's great. I
Yeah.
love that.
And in some cases, as I've told peers, as we make decisions, certain things don't have a return. Like there is no return ticket. Once we go through this door, we need to go. One of the phrases I always use with peers and in executive conversations is eyes wide open. And once something's in the decision box, certain decisions can't be remade. And so it's the eyes wide open moment, guys. We're going to do this, but just know that this is a one-way ticket to whatever the destination is, and we all have to live with it. And we have to also make that representation to the board. Like directors, we are making a decision as an executive team that we believe has whatever exponential growth or whatever the end result is that we're pitching to the board as strategically aligned with where we want to go. We are making this decision as a group. And we understand that once we make this decision, it comes with some consequences that cannot be undone or rewritten, if you will. And as long as everyone's locking arms and doing that together with their eyes wide open, I don't have any issues with taking risks.
Similarly, so there's a Lexology article called "Discipline is the Differentiator: A GC's Guide to AI Governance." And so bringing this into kind of the AI world, what you're describing with the eyes wide open and the kind of like making sure that that a risk taken is taken because you're aware of it, not because you didn't know. How has AI either changed or amplified or the ability to drive that discipline?
Well, I think I mentioned earlier, right? We're a very test heavy culture. We do a lot of A/B testing. We're always trying to refine the experience for the customer and leverage technology and other platforms we have, infrastructure we have to present the best possible product to consumers. And so how that's shown up is, in most cases, consumers today are doing they're discovering financial products, still through the traditional kind of SEO, Google kind of infrastructure or experience, but more and more turning to these foundation models and their platforms to do discovery, right? And so we have to meet the customer where they are, and that means that we have to reimagine in some ways NerdWallet in the way in which we share and furnish information to the public. So we're figuring that out. But what the Claudes and the Chat GPTs and the Geminis of the world, the Perplexities, and you can go on and on. What that's also done is allow development to dynamically or exponentially increase. And now anyone in the company can vibe code an idea, and within minutes it can be like an actual experience and a presentation that could be, furnished to a customer. And so when you have the explosion of ideation, you have to also have a scaled governance model that supports the level of creativity that exists and supports the possibilities of what could be, released and shipped to customers. And I think that's what every person in my role is managing, I guess is the best word, is how do I embrace innovation and creativity and ideation while also doing that in a way in which you make it durable and you protect the customer, you protect the company, you ultimately protect the board as well as their fiduciaries, right, to shareholders in terms of how they go about overseeing the governance of the company. And so that's not an easy job, right? Because you've got, in our case, 600 plus folks that are nerds, right? They're genius. They're very articulate and very accomplished professionals in their various disciplines, and they have all these ideas. And now you have tools and the ability to bring those ideas to fruition and present them to the customers almost in real time. And you got to have the governance in place to, one, enable that, allow for that, but also to do it in a way that's durable and doesn't wreck the company. And I will be the first one to admit I don't have all the solutions because the questions change every day, right? And so the answers change in a very dynamic fashion as the questions are presented. Well, I think you have to be I think you mentioned earlier, how do you get upstream? I think you get upstream by showing a willingness to engage in the conversation around business principles and how we achieve the goal that we set out. And then you have to also have some flexibility to fail. We're going to make some mistakes along the way, but you just have to make sure that the failures and the mistakes aren't catastrophic to the business. And the only way that you can ensure that is by being a part of the process. I think a lot of times legal wants to stand on the outside and they just want to give well, here's the risk matrix, right? These are the the parade of horribles that could happen. And you make the decision, business. I've encouraged my team, both on the legal and on the safety side and security, be a part of the discussion, be in the room, say, hey, I see where we're trying to go. This is great. I'm all in. But have we considered this? But have we considered that? Can we get alignment from this perspective or based upon this consideration? Be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem identification, if you will. And I think that's how you get in the room more and you get brought in earlier versus finding out after the fact.
So on the AI side, you mentioned culture of experimentation. You mentioned there's some AI tools that AI is changing how customers experience the process of financial research. And
Yes.
obviously NerdWallet has both the human experts as well as all this content built up over, more than a decade of doing this.
Mm-hmm.
What it sounds to me like, okay, so a lot of what your team may be doing is, we've talked on the podcast before about product counseling. So
Yes.
getting in there in the room where the experience to be launched is being described and taking that yes and approach, or the yes, but let's figure out these things approach. So
Yes.
I want to use a real example because I think it would be fun for people that are in a similar position and look up to you and your team for how you do this.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to have to use like a NerdWallet example. So let's just pick this one. So in Canada last year, there was an airline, and I think it was Air Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And their chatbot, it was one of these classic customer service chatbots, powered by AI. But essentially the person said, hey, I want to get a bereavement fare. But what happened was they asked for the bereavement fare after having taken the flight. And that was not the policy, is that you had to ask in advance. And the chatbot said, yeah, we offer a bereavement fare. Here it is. You can get the discount. So it basically either hallucinated or anyways, it got it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And the court actually held like, hey, in this case, you know what, even though it linked out to the proper policy, the airline in that case was ordered to pay the discount. Now, who knows where the law has gone since, but something like that, walk us through, you're being proposed, a chatbot, or you're testing it or what have you. Your team is advising on something like that. And I don't know how real of an example that is for you.
No, I think that's a great example though.
All right. So yeah,
Right.
how do you advise on that? And then is it really a legal issue? It's kind of to your point, maybe it's a business question, but anyways, how would you advise on that?
Well,
You're in that meeting and
yeah, I don't think that either one of those are necessarily business. That to me is a customer service and a policy driven kind of consideration, right? But now let's think about it. So, in our organization, I have lawyers that are embedded product counsel that truly serve as like quasi GCs of their respective business unit or operating company. And so, in the deployment of this chatbot, what I would hope in using the NerdWallet model is that product counsel is in the room. They understand the goal, right? The end result that we want to present to the customer, which is a seamless kind of chat experience that would rival what they would have with a normal customer service representative, right? Understanding that the customer service representative in many cases has some discretion to make some judgment calls as they're dynamically engaging with customers. So we have to, with that foresight, understand that probably the AI chatbot needs to have some degree of discretion as well, right? Now, most people would say, whoa, we're giving computers discretion. But remember, the goal is for the customer to feel like they're dealing with a human being. And the human being has some discretion, which means that you have to build into it the discretion for the AI to make some judgment calls as well. That's going to be scary to people, but ultimately you have to be foundationally aligned with the business outcome that you're trying to achieve, right? And so with that said, right, what I would hope, if using a NerdWallet example, is that my embedded lawyer would be in the room, say, let me see the user interface and how it's presented to the customer, and then ultimately, can we test it? Can I be a part of the sandbox to test it against a number of conclusions? And what I would hope that my lawyers would do is to go to leverage AI to ask, give me as many organic, natural questions that a user might ask to this chatbot so that I can test, and then go in the sandbox and ideate with the team on, hey, have you thought about this? Have we thought about this? But if this happens, what happens? So that you can cover off 85% of the use cases that might be out there, understanding that we have to build in some flexibility for the 15% we didn't think about, but ultimately still steep everything in presenting the best and the most realistic customer experience to the customer. So I don't think that situation that we just went over with Air Canada should have ever gone to court, because ultimately I would imagine that the goal was to deliver to a customer the most realistic experience. And what will we normally do for a customer? If they got access to a benefit that they otherwise had to get pre-authorized, wouldn't we honor it? Because that's the right customer service thing to do.
Yeah.
And so you kind of get to the right conclusion by just using, I hate to, not saying that anyone in this situation didn't use common sense. I'm a big person on common sense, like common sense and meeting the customer where they are. And ultimately, if it's going to build a customer that we have for life that will come back and return because we made provision for him or her during this very, very rough time in their life, we need to do right by the customer, because we're in the business of having recurring customers. So I hope that is responsive.
I think it makes sense. And then you're like, okay, you're litigating this, and like the press that you got over it is probably worse than the original thing.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, then you get the obviously ridiculous examples of the people trying to, buy a Honda for $10 or whatever through the chatbot. And like that one's ridiculous. But this one was legit. I think it's interesting. Like we had a similar conversation with the general counsel out of South Africa running a large healthcare system there. And he said, in healthcare, the kind of like, obviously people think patient first, but even on billing, that he essentially created something where there could be concessions on billing at the lower levels, even notwithstanding that, like, okay, is this an admission? Is this whatever? And it's like, okay, no. And he felt that was, or he explained that was relatively revolutionary, but that similar, where in this case, it's a private healthcare system and they've done very well in part because of that customer-centric approach.
Yeah.
I love that. All right. So
putting the customer first will lead you sometimes to conclusions or outcomes that make you cringe maybe a bit as a lawyer. Like,
exactly. Yeah, but
you have to get comfortable.
Getting over the cringe. Yeah, no, the kind of like and it's even, I mean, the thing is like, this is business. Like these trade-offs of like, hold your nose and sign the contract. Sometimes you got to do that. And I ran a reference for somebody recently, and the reference was like the COO to whom this person reported. And the COO said, I said, what areas can they work on? And they said, well, when he first joined, he was kind of like, he really didn't like holding his nose ever. It was kind of like, well, we got to do this deal because it's going to be fundamental for this new business or whatever. And, I think like this eyes wide open of like, okay, this deal is not great for XYZ reasons, but the realization that like, okay, the alternatives like are not great either. And this is like, you get in and you believe, and ultimately like working together with the business, that's what it is. And presumably, and like in the case of NerdWallet, you've had this success over 2 decades building that trust. And it's like, okay, in that case, it was a construction company. But anyways, like the point of like, it is something where in-house you have to sometimes realize that like the legal best answer is just not always going to be the thing.
Yeah, and the legal best answer is just one of the many considerations. And you have to be aware and cognizant of this. If it was only a legal consideration, this is what the likely outcome, but synthesizing all of the different outcomes together, what's the best business decision is kind of an amalgamation of all of those things, right? And it comes out to maybe 70 or 60% kind of uh, low risk, and maybe there's 40% of it that's a little bit more risk than you might ordinarily be comfortable with. But no business has been successful and scaled without taking some amount of outside risk at some point in time. So
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, it comes up a lot on the pod of like the most secure software is software that does nothing. Like,
yes.
so it's very secure, but it literally does nothing. So yeah,
Exactly.
All right, so let's talk about AI a little bit. You
Mhm.
said the future of in-house legal is the legal team using AI to evolve from being a bottleneck into being an operating system for the company.
Yes.
That's an interesting take. Say more.
Yes. So, from my perspective, I think, early in the pod, I mentioned I see kind of trust and safety as air traffic control function, right? And so, similarly, and I can speak to NerdWallet, but I've been at many companies over my history. In differing kind of capacities, legal has always been kind of a command control center at the companies that I've been in, and I think AI has kind of, going back to an earlier comment, AI has enhanced the velocity in which people can ideate, create, and ship ideas. And so legal has to be able to evaluate, give perspective, and ultimately advise at the same velocity. And there is absolutely no way to do that without leveraging some form of AI tooling, or in many senses, agentic solutions. Right. I think that is a reality that in-house departments have got to figure out and solve for. We're doing that. We're figuring out what agentic solutions we can bring to bear on things that are mundane and routine, like contract review and product marketing review and things of that nature. And we've got some great partners out there that we're leveraging to help us solve that problem. But in order for legal to scale, or in my case, for legal and security to scale, we have to bring to bear some truly advanced agentic and AI solutions to help us just keep pace with the work, right? And so, from a command center perspective, we have to also then orient the business into understanding that in some cases, for heightened, more judgment based considerations, you're going to engage with a human, a lawyer. For things that are routine, kind of call it run of the mill assembly line work, you're going to be dealing with an agent or a non human based solution. And that has a different set of SLAs, that has a different degree of error correction and imperfection to it. And we all have to be willing to move at this new pace and accept kind of a new experience in-house. And I think a lot of our work at NerdWallet has been around, hey, explaining to the business, we're going to evolve dynamically with the pace of technological kind of advancement. That means that the experience for the end user changes in-house, from a constituent perspective, experience perspective. And we need everyone to give us grace as we figure that all out together, right? And we've done a pretty good job of that. I think, the speed that we've been able to deploy certain solutions has helped people move things through the warehouse, if you will, to ultimately ship it. But also that's come with quite a few pivots as we learn more. We understand how we need to change certain things, to be more corrective in terms of what it ultimately delivers to a requester, whether it be a request for a contract review that has an agentic agent associated with the initial pass of that review, or in some cases the routing of approvals and signatures that don't have a human being involved with it. It's all, for me, a very exciting time, like to figure this out in real time while the ground is shifting beneath me. To me, that's exciting, right? It's for someone that's been practicing, 25 or whatever, 25, almost 26 years. These little moments in history I'm living history, right? We're all living
Yeah.
history,
Yeah.
is exciting. So,
I mean, I remember on the living history point, the first time I used Google back in 2000, and I was like, and same thing, time using AI, and now first time having an agent end-to-end review a contract. So tactically, it sounds like you asked for grace from the business as you implement the agentic
yes.
things in legal.
Yep.
So how are you picking the use cases? And then if I'm a GC diving into AI, what are kind of your top 3 tips on implementation?
So first, how am I picking the use cases? Obviously, I think I mentioned earlier, you try to do things that aren't going to be catastrophic if they go horribly wrong, right? And so you pick kind of what I'll call low risk kind of items, and you test around those things. So, vendor agreements that are below a certain threshold. Do I care if the widget contract for 100K is wrong or something? Like, no, I don't. Nobody cares. Or an NDA. Obviously, you have guardrails. We've been practicing with these guardrails, and who knows how many countless NDAs we've signed over the course of the last 4 or 5 years. You start with the things that are routine and mundane and low and minimal risk, and you use. I don't think lawyers believe in testing a lot of things. We want everything to be perfect. That's part of our problems, right? Is that we are the kind of slaves to perfection, if you will. And I think for somebody like you and I, who have been doing this a long time, I'm very comfortable with something being about 70%, 70 to 75%, because most of the time I only get a chance to come up with advice that's about 70 to 75% accurate, right? And so, I'm comfortable living in that space. But again, as practitioners, I think we have to be generally comfortable with saying that what I'm going to roll out here in this kind of AI powered world may only be about 75% or 70 to 75% accurate. And I've got to give myself grace, and I've got to be willing to operate in the ambiguous or nebulous world of what could potentially happen, and be agile enough to respond accordingly. So that's kind of the answer to the first part of the question. I think the second part is what would I advise? I would advise, if you don't have a legal operations function, think about it. I think, legal operations and legal operations professionals are becoming an absolute requirement for anyone that wants to have a scaled and resilient kind of in-house legal function, period, full stop. And so having a very seasoned legal operations team or a seasoned legal operations professional helps you sit down, go through all of the different work streams that come through the department, evaluate what are the routine, mundane, repetitive, kind of monotonous things that we do, and synthesize that into a list, and then take that list and say, these are the things that are give way to kind of some form of AI powered agentic solution, right? And that's what we did. We made it very basic in terms of, we made a list, we went through, we evaluated all of our different work streams, figured out what do we do on a routine basis that, if we had the technological solution to solve for, we would. And then we took that list and we said, okay, this is where we're going to start. Let's knock out how we can bring an AI powered solution to dealing with these tasks. And I'm proud to say we're probably 3/4 of the way through that list. And that has freed up my legal professionals to then focus on the things that matter most, which is bringing their judgment and expertise to bear on the most essential problems that are being that the business is being confronted with, for which they need legal advice to solve for and answer. So that's how we've gone.
Awesome. What's been the most successful part of the rollout?
Successful part of the rollout. Well, I mean, I don't know for you. Probably many of your listeners. There's certain. The older I get, the more small things tend to annoy me. So like this forever, we have to triage so much, and even myself. You'd be surprised by the number of Slack messages I get from nerds about who do I go to for this thing? And it doesn't matter how much publicly available information there is about who to go to for a thing, or is this approved? Or a lot of it is forum shopping and things of that nature, which we won't get into here, but that kind of over time on a daily basis annoys me. And so forever I've been trying to figure out, how can we bring an ask me anything experience to a channel Slack, right? That allows for all that triage and all those frequently asked questions to be routed to an agent. So have somebody else give you that answer, right? Small for some, huge for E. But at any rate, I'm proud to say that we are now in the final stages of being able to release that, which again will free up. If you multiply, if say for example, E is getting, and this is not an overstatement, I might get 30 of those questions a day via Slack, right?
Wow.
Multiply that by, I've got 17 people in legal and another 17 people in security, and they're probably getting 20 or 30 of their own questions, right? That, by solving for that and having an agentic solution for that frees up capacity for the entire team, that then gives the team the ability to really focus on much more substantive kind of topics and questions, and render even more substantive advice that moves the business forward. And so I'm very happy about finding the right partner to help us with solve for that thing, and being in the final stages of deploying a solution there. So
I love that. All right, let's go to the lightning round. What is a book, podcast, or mentor that shaped how you think?
Well, I have several mentors. The one that stands out is I had a mentor. His name is Ron Brown. He's the general counsel of a real estate holding company, a conglomerate of different companies in Indiana, and called Pedcor. And when I worked for him, we would go on these long walks around. There was a reflecting pond. The story is gonna
go.
It's gonna meander a little bit, but he smoked a lot of cigarettes at the time. He doesn't smoke anymore, but so he would always want a smoke buddy. So we go outside and we walk around this reflecting pool while he smoked a cigarette, and we really just talk about legal problems and things we needed to solve, right? And at that time in my career, I was transitioning into being more of a high level executive kind of thinker, right? From a legal perspective. And we would talk and talk, and I would give him all these super technical things. And he was like, let's just break it down to basics. Like, let's just talk about this like a normal human problem and figure out how to like what's the common sense solution? Like, okay, put the legal stuff, put the legal shit aside, and like, let's talk about it from like a common sense perspective. And then we would just have a more organic conversation about what's the most sensible, pragmatic, kind of common sense way to solve a particular problem. And that resonated for me. Why at that time, I don't know, but what it helped me reorient myself toward is not thinking I have to over-engineer solutions or over-engineer advice. Sometimes it's as simple as just being a voice of reason and pragmatism and common sense in a room. it's amazing to me, the higher I go in corporate America, the less common sense is brought to bear on things. I think because people feel like, because they've got so much experience and because they've seen so many things and because you're working in a corporate environment, that the answer has to be complex. A lot of times it just has to be kind of a common sense thing that's steeped in a first principle, right? And so that's I think about, I kind of harken back to those times of walking around the reflecting pool while he smoked his cigarette, and the kind of just the general things that I learned from those talks. And I pull more from those conversations and the problem, kind of the solution kind of process that we went through there than probably other times in my career, which where the stakes were higher and it probably more sophisticated or technical kind of application of principles were at stake or were necessary to kind of talk about the solution. But
I love that.
yeah,
I love
so.
that. All right. Let's see. Someone pick, what would you like for folks to take away from our conversation?
I think, for me, I think you spoke to some of the things I've written about in this whole notion of decision discipline, right? And it's not necessarily, I think more, I would encourage more of my peers and more of us in the in-house practice of law to not be afraid of change and the dynamic shift that is occurring in the practice of law, right? Because of AI, right? I think that if anything, for those that have been practitioners, this is a doorway for what it could be infinite job security. From my perspective, and what I mean by that is, by being the person in the room that brings rigor to the discussion and is there to evaluate the decision, help evaluate the gaps, have the institutional knowledge of the failures and where we've missed before, and bring that to bear in the conversation, and to be air traffic control, to make sure things are always aligned around a set of common perspectives, is an opportunity for us, because for so long we've wanted to be at the table. And I think because of the nature of AI, it gives us an automatic seat at the table, really in perpetuity, if we don't mess it up, right? And so I think that bringing the kind of the decision discipline to bear on conversations, whether it be at the board level, helping to facilitate postmortems on decisions that are made, to help be a voice of reason, to say, we did this before, here were the gaps that we had, this is how it came to bear on the ultimate performance of the business against whatever the initiative was, is a value add that I think may be lost if we don't become the champions of bringing that form of conversation or rigor to these strategic discussions. So I'm really excited about where we are as a profession in the future, and the opportunity for us to be the voice of reason and discipline in the room. And I hope other people embrace this kind of dynamic or fundamental shift as well, and think about it from that perspective. I'm a glass half full kind of person, so
Let's
that's
go.
the way I look at life.
I love that. Ekumene, this was a really important conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. That was
Take care.
Ekumene Lysonge, Chief Legal Officer and Corporate Secretary at NerdWallet, and one of the sharpest thinkers we've had on the show on legal leadership and where we're heading. Whether you're leading a legal team, looking for infinite AI job security, building legal tools, or working with clients in-house, head over to gc.ai to see how the most forward-thinking folks like E are doing their best work. Follow CZ and Friends wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.